Why did President Trump fire Jim Comey? And why did he fire him this week? So there's actually two parts to that dilemma that we've all been worrying about and wondering about in the last 24 hours. Instead of talking about the fall of Rome, our next speaker will talk about the vigorous rejuvenation of America. Under the former director of the FBI, his leadership, many thought the rule of law was a quaint, antiquated concept. But now that concept is germinating again. Please welcome our president and current events knowledgeable person to discuss that, Mr. Erik.
So when Bill Clinton was in office, some of you didn't realize this, but Hillary had a pet rabbit. And she lost her pet rabbit. It went running off into the forest. And so she invited the FBI, the CIA, and the LAPD to try and find her rabbit. So the FBI shows up, goes into the forest, interviews every animal, every plant, asks anybody if they've seen the rabbit, comes back and says, couldn't find the rabbit, there is no rabbit, you must be mistaken. There's no rabbit anywhere, Mrs. Clinton. So then she goes and talks to the CIA. CIA goes in, looks for 2 weeks, can't find the rabbit, so sets it on fire, figuring they'll flush out the rabbit. No rabbit comes out, everything else comes running out of the forest except for a rabbit. It's half burned down. They come back to her and said, well, we probably killed the rabbit, but the rabbit had it coming. So then the LAPD goes into the forest, and one day they come back, they have a beat up, bruised, bloody bear who's saying, okay, okay, I'm a rabbit, I'm a rabbit.
Oh, Jesus.
I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. That is what we say before we testify before Congress. That's also what we say when the FBI is investigating us and trying to find out if we've committed a crime. Mr. Comey came before Congress last week, used those exact same words, and said that hundreds or thousands of emails had been transferred from Hillary Clinton to Huma Abedin's husband, Anthony Weiner. Now, Anthony Weiner is being currently indicted and under investigation for sexting underage girls. He has been in trouble many times before for having these types of sexual perversion problems. So he is a big blackmail risk. It's not a good idea to have confidential information on his computer, because all Russia has to do is call him and say, hey, if you think you're in trouble now, we'll get your butt thrown in jail by leaking some of this stuff. But if you share some of those goodies on your computer, we won't spill the beans on you. This is why this stuff is important. There are rules that tell you you can't do what Hillary Clinton did. Taking classified information and either backing it up or intentionally forwarding it to an unsecure source. Whether she did it either way, still breaking the law. So you have to ask yourself, what did he do after he testified to Congress that this had happened? He went back, searched his notes and said, oh, well, I had said it had been forwarded, but now I want to quibble a little bit and say that it was automatically sent there instead of intentionally forwarded. Because remember, he has this fiction that you can only get in trouble if you intentionally put those secrets out at risk. But in fact, I will show you that the precedent that's been established with a lot of other Republicans is you don't have to show intention. Negligence, carelessness, they're the same thing. You don't have to intend for the enemy to get your secrets if you make them available for somebody to easily steal. So he sent a letter, Mr. Comey did, saying, I may have misspoken a little bit here. It wasn't really an intentional forwarding, it was an automatic backup. What's the real difference? It's interesting that Scooter Libby did something similar when he was being investigated for releasing the name of Mrs. Flame, who was a CIA operative. This was a big scandal several years ago under President Bush. And he was charged with obstructing justice because he, after the interview with the FBI, where he said the same words that Mr. Comey said, then sent a qualifying letter a couple days later saying, I might have misspoken under oath. And here's how I did it. I made a slight problem in my dates. And he ended up being convicted for that. And he ended up getting a 30-month prison sentence for correcting his testimony after the fact. So why does Scooter Libby get a 30-month prison sentence for doing the exact same thing that Mr. Comey did? Well, that's the same question Donald Trump was asking himself. And Donald Trump decided Scooter Libby lost his job. Maybe Mr. Comey needs to lose his. Are there going to be consequences for people misspeaking under oath? That's one of the reasons that he got fired this week. There's another good reason that he got fired this week. We have been waiting for an assistant deputy attorney general to be approved for that position. We've been waiting all the way up to 14 days ago. 14 days ago, they finally gave Donald Trump his assistant deputy attorney general. And if you recall, the attorney general, Jeff Sessions, has recused himself from these types of a situation. So no decision could come down from the attorney general. It had to wait for Congress to get around to giving the deputy attorney general a job. Now, who is the deputy attorney general? You guys know his name? Rod Rosenstein. Rosenstein. I'll take your pronunciation as being correct. I only read, I don't actually watch TV. So Rod Rosenstein. So Rod Rosenstein was finally allowed to have his job. And so he wrote this letter in which he talked about the precedents that had been established and why Mr. Comey needed to lose his job. It only happened 14 days ago. Couldn't have happened any sooner. But before I get into that, I want to rehash what Mr. Comey did on July 5th, because this is, you need to know, or I need to refresh your memory before we talk about how he exceeded his authority. On a July 5th news conference of last year, Mr. Comey said, although we did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless in their handling of very sensitive, highly classified information. He also said Clinton's emails including 7 message chains with information classified as top secret. None of these emails should have been on any kind of unclassified system, which is what she did by putting it on her home computer before she deleted 30,000 out of the 60,000 emails, which is also considered obstruction of justice in the minds of people who care about that type of thing. The security culture of the State Department was generally lacking in the kind of care for classified information found elsewhere in the government. So this wasn't normal practice. Other people had gotten in trouble for this. She'd been warned not to do it. She did it anyway. Why did she do it anyway? Because she had gotten away with it once before. The Whitewater, do you guys remember that, the Whitewater scandal? She got subpoenaed by Robert Fisk, a special prosecutor, to give up all of her records that she had kept with her religiously since the time that she had been the attorney for the defendants in the lawsuit. She couldn't find them, so she couldn't give them up. 2 years later, Vincent Foster commits suicide, and all of her records are in Vincent Foster's possession in the White House because Hillary had walked on over to Vincent Foster and given them to him so that she could credibly claim, I don't know where the records are. She got away with it once. That's obstruction of justice. Nobody went after her for it once. Why not do it again? So she put all the records over on Huma Abedin's husband's server, hoping that no one would ever find it. She got away with it once, she'll do it again. Comey acknowledged that the FBI did not normally make public its recommendation to prosecutors as to whether to bring criminal charges. This is where Jim Comey goes out on a limb and is going to lose his job. And I'll get to that in a moment. One last thing. Although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case. That's not his job. His job is to investigate it and hand it to the Justice Department. And the Justice Department makes the determination, are we going to prosecute or not? That is called the balance of power. We have a balance of power in this country to prevent one aspect of the government from being corrupt and not having a second aspect watch over it. So we have the FBI do the investigation, we have the Justice Department do the prosecution. We do it that way on purpose. So, if you open up the media and look for why Jim Comey was fired, you have to do a lot of searching. The mainstream media is not letting you know about the letter that's out there that actually justifies the how and the why of why he was fired. But if you dig around long enough, you will find Rod Rosenstein's letter. And let me read to you exactly why Donald Trump said, or Rod Rosenstein said, that Jim Comey should be fired. The director was wrong to usurp the Attorney General's authority on July 5th, 2016. That's what I just read he was doing. And announced his conclusion that the case should be closed without prosecution. It is not the function of the director to make such an announcement. At most, the director should have said that the FBI had completed its investigation and presented its findings to federal prosecutors. The director now defends his decision by asserting that he believed Attorney General Loretta Lynch had a conflict. But the FBI director is never empowered to supplant federal prosecutors and assume command of the Justice Department. There is a well-established process for other officials to step in when a conflict results or requires the recusal of the Attorney General. This is legalese for saying what I just said. He violated his job specifics, decided to have this big conference, and announced that the Clintons were off scot-free. Compounding the error, the director ignored another long-standing principle. We do not hold press conferences to release derogatory information about the subject of a declined criminal investigation. Interestingly enough, the Democrats hated Jim Comey when he did this. They thought he was influencing the direction. They were livid. Many of them, including Chuck Schumer, called for his immediate resignation. They said we have lost any confidence in his ability to do his job. Chuck Schumer forgets that nowadays as he's demanding that Trump be impeached, but he actually was one of the first people to suggest that Jim Comey should lose his job back near July of last year. But the goal of a federal criminal investigation is not to announce our thoughts at a press conference. The goal is to determine whether there is sufficient evidence to justify a federal criminal prosecution. Then allow a federal prosecutor who exercises authority delegated by the Attorney General to make a prosecutorial decision. And then, if prosecution is warranted, let the judge and jury determine the facts. Do you remember when Mr. Comey said no prosecutor would take up this case? That's not his decision. It's not his call. And he should never have a press conference in which he said, Hillary is probably guilty, but probably won't be prosecuted, so we're letting her go. That's not her decision. He should have taken what he had, kept it to himself, given it to the Justice Department, and let them do their job. Now, who else believes that this letter has been written in accordance with previous precedent? Well, the funny thing is, the guy who wrote this letter was just confirmed 14 days ago. He was appointed under Obama to this position, and he was confirmed 94-6. So he has been a previous appointee of Obama. He's probably a closet Democrat, but it doesn't matter whether he's a closet Democrat or not. Everyone thought he was a great guy 14 days ago when they approved him, 94-6. Now here's some other people who believe that Mr. Comey should be fired. Alberto Gonzales, who also served as Attorney General under President George Bush, called the decision on July 5th an error in judgment. Okay? Here's Erik Holder. You guys know Erik Holder. He was the Attorney General under Obama. He's the guy who's now micromanaging our economy here in California with the 4% tax increases and other stuff that are now happening. Erik Holder, who served as Deputy Attorney General under President Clinton and Attorney General under President Obama, said that the director's decision was incorrect. It violated long-standing Justice Department policies and traditions. It ran counter to guidance that I put in place 4 years ago, laying out the proper way to conduct investigations during an election season. Holder concluded that the director broke with these fundamental principles and negatively affected public trust in both the Justice Department and the FBI. That's one of the leading Democrats at the time, one of the leading, foremost legal trained Democrats who was Attorney General of the time, and he says this was wrong. He should never have done this. This is a violation of how we do things. And why? Because it unduly affected the election. Democrats were livid that this happened. Former Deputy Attorneys General Gorelick and Thompson described the unusual events as real-time, raw-take transparency taken to its illogical limit, a kind of reality TV of federal criminal investigation that is antithetical to the interests of justice. So you have not one, not two attorney generals, but 4 or 5, 6 attorney generals from across the spectrum saying that what he did was wrong. I had talked about Scooter Libby and how he got in trouble for modifying what he had said before Congress a week later. Who are some other people who have gotten in trouble for doing what Hillary Clinton has done? Well, let's look at Mr. Petraeus. Mr. Petraeus took some black books with some classified material and handed it to his mistress in order to put his autobiography together. He ended up, after 2 years of legal negotiations, agreeing to a misdemeanor in which he was eligible for a year in prison, and the prosecutors recommended a sentence of probation for 2 years and a $40,000 fine. Did Hillary Clinton get a misdemeanor? Did she get a $40,000 fine? Did she lose her job? No. Who else has been attacked for doing the exact same thing Hillary Clinton did? John Deutsch, the CIA director from May 1995 to December 1996, lost his security clearances, but was not charged for keeping government secrets on his home computer. But he lost his security clearances. Did Hillary Clinton lose any security clearances for what she did? No. Samuel Berger, a former national security advisor, pleaded guilty in 2005 to a misdemeanor and paid a $50,000 fine for removing classified documents from the National Archives. Everyone else seems to get in trouble as long as they're Republicans. Why isn't Hillary Clinton getting in trouble? Because she was protected by Jim Comey. Jim Comey gave out limited immunities to all the people who could have testified against her and allowed them to deep six all of the actual evidence which was on their laptops. So now you can't prosecute these people because all the evidence is gone. All the evidence has been ditched, except what you can get back from Anthony Weiner's computer. So what does that mean? I promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. That means something if there are consequences for breaking that. If the rule of law applies, then you have to punish the people who disobey that. Other people have been punished. There are still more culprits to come. Fellow Toastmasters.